Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New Law Careers series with our focus on legal operations. It's kind of sad for me to say that this is the third and final episode in this focus on legal ops, because it's been just such an amazing series. But we're going out with a bang, I have to say, today. We have truly just an incredible group of people to have a chat with about the challenges and opportunities of the legal ops role. So with all of that being said, I'm really excited about this session. So I'm going to hand over to you, Mollie, to introduce yourself and all of the panelists as well. And I'll be back a little bit later on to say goodbye as well. See you later, folks.
Thanks so much, Terry. Lovely to see everyone for the third and for now final session in this series. Today is a really exciting session. I think for those that have been here along the journey, we did the sort of what is legal ops. Then we talked about some theory around legal ops professionals. And here today, you have the panel of legal ops professionals to hear from. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce each person at a very high level, because as we have our discussion, you'll get a sense of their background and things as well. So first on the list is Connie Brenton. So Connie is the Vice President of Law, Technology and Operations at NetApp Inc. She is the founder and former CEO of Clock, which is something we have spoken about a lot in these sessions, and has more than a decade of legal operations expertise in major enterprises such as Oracle Corporation and Sun Microsystems. She's internationally known as a disruptor of the legal industry and highly regarded for her groundbreaking work in legal ops, and we're very thankful that she's here with us today. Next, we have the wonderful Anna Golovsky, who's Executive Manager, Legal and Company Secretariat Operations at IAG. So she's responsible in this role for leading and driving change in the legal and company secretariat roles across Australia and New Zealand, with a range of initiatives around best practice in operations, legal service delivery, technology and management of legal service providers. So very well placed to talk on this panel today. Anna was previously the head of operations for the legal and governance team at AMP and has also worked in private practice for many years. She's the co-chair of the Australian chapter of Clock and has a real passion and commitment for driving change and innovation in the delivery of legal services. So thank you, Anna, for joining us. Next up, Leor Nickig's on the screen. She's head of legal operations for dispute, competition and insurance at Minter Ellison. During her time at Minter Ellison, she's also worked in head of legal ops roles in many other areas of the business, and was a key stakeholder involved in building out the market-leading legal ops function. Prior to being at Minter Ellison, Leor practiced as a litigation lawyer for a number of years and has transitioned out of practice into knowledge and learning lawyer roles before moving into legal ops. Leor is passionate about developing and implementing strategies which establish a collaborative framework between legal, technical and business teams to enable legal teams to deliver their services efficiently and consistently. So welcome to Leor. And last but absolutely not least, we have Julian Ramasamy, who is the head of legal operations at ANZ. Julian's been in this role, I think, just over a year, maybe a little bit more than a year, and has an extensive career in the legal industry, starting out, I believe, at Slater & Gordon in legal IT roles many moons ago, and has ultimately, been in a number of sort of senior roles in operations and strategy in the legal industry. Prior to being in his role at ANZ, Julian was the Chief Operating Officer at Mills Oakley and has also run his own management consultancy business, so has a really interesting range of perspectives to bring to today's session, which is a good lead into my first question, which, Julian, I'm going to throw to you first. So, as we talk about the career path into these kind of roles, not everyone on the panel, I'm looking at Julian, started life as a lawyer before being a legal ops professional. So, Julian, do you think it's a plus or a minus coming from a non-legal background, and how do you find that coming, into these roles? Obviously, you've had a long time in the industry, but not specifically practicing as a lawyer.
Yeah, look, I think it absolutely is an advantage. I would say that it's self-serving. That's the way I like to roll. But I do, because I think anytime we look at any diversity or any initiative along these lines, or anything that involves that, we're trying to get different angles on the same problems. The problems don't change, but the solutions often do. And I think that's because we get people from out of industry, people who aren't lawyers, Does it make some things harder? Absolutely. The number of times I've been asked to review a document and people get really second-rate service from my playing lawyer. Absolutely, that happens too. But just as many times, I think that I look at some issues through a slightly different lens that perhaps lawyers sometimes miss. And I think it's an advantage, and it's just the nature of diversity.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's make sure we get the other perspective. I mean, certainly interesting in our organisation seeing the mix, how well the mix works of having lawyers and non-lawyers. So Anna, obviously you had a really long career as a lawyer before moving over to legal ops. So what are your thoughts on this question and Julian's perspective here?
Look, I mean, there's no right answer, right? I think diversity is the key. But I think for those on the session today, if you're considering a career in legal ops, whether you're a lawyer or whether you're not a lawyer, I think it's a great thing for you to consider. From my perspective, as you say, I did have a long career in private practice, and I look at my legal ops foray as really an extension of that long career. And it's given me new life and new interest and sort of allowed me to explore new territories. So that's my perspective. I spent my life as a technology and outsourcing lawyer, and I think the skills that I acquired during that career were really a logical progression for me into legal ops. When I moved in-house after being in private practice, I was always exploring how I could do things more efficiently, more quickly, bringing consistency to what I was doing. So, and that's when my interest in legal ops really took off. I look at legal ops as solving problems for lawyers, and having been a lawyer and experienced the problems, legal ops was really a logical progression for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. For those that have watched the second session, I talk a lot about some of the things that make people good or, drawn towards, legal ops. And I think, Anna, from the lawyer perspective, you just covered a whole lot of them in terms of some of the things that caught your attention about legal ops. But in terms of that, point about solving problems for lawyers, I want to dig into a little bit with the panel around what some of the focus areas are at the moment and, what those key challenges and opportunities are, hence the title of the session. Connie, I want to start with you here. So, you lead an award-winning legal department at NetApp, which is known for its innovation. I'm really interested to hear about what some of the focus areas for your team have been in the last 12 months in this space, and what are some of the challenges you've faced in those areas?
A decade ago, when we started CLOC, we were in a position to define the role. The industry now has gained maturity, and now we are going to start talking about creating the legal ops practice area, similar to employment, litigation, corporate, and some of that will bring additional opportunities for those who are entering into this space. And it also comes with some of the old issues that we have had, some of the old challenges. So in the last year, here are three things to think about. One, and this is in our DNA, I think almost as a profession and a practice area, is collaboration. We are jointly solving new problems. Because legal was one of the last to come into the area of automation, our technology is still continuing to grow and offer interfaces that are more user-friendly, they're more intuitive, they're easier to implement than any of the other groups that have come before us, like HR and IT. So in that respect, it's very good. So collaboration, however, as we grow as a group, is important because there is so much available that we need to be able to cull that with the use of shared experiences. The second is to just start. So these are some of the things that just always accompany the role of legal operations. Don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all, many of us are using new technologies, and when you put a new technology in, you have to anticipate that you will have problems. So just because lawyers have a personality type of perfectionism, I usually start rolling out all of our technologies with, we know there are going to be mistakes. Our role is to identify those mistakes first. And then the third, and I think this has been the new shiny object for a bit of time, is how we contract. And the contracting space has grown from a straight CLM technology offering to a more segmented way of working. So you have the front end before you sign. That's the workflow piece, and that's the technology that has existed, and that's what most people think of when they think about contracting and CLM technologies. However, we now have some new AI technologies that are working. So we can put a contract in, compare it to third-party paper, and it can give us a pass, no pass reading immediately. And if all of the sections pass, it goes immediately to signature. If it doesn't, then it can then go into a third bucket of technologies, and that is redlining. And it's AI redlining that the machine will automatically then take those paragraphs that did not pass, they will redline and then pass it to signature. And then the final, and this is a whole nother group of technologies, is the post-signature. How can you find what you need to find? How can you turn unstructured data into structured data? And that segment is now growing like crazy as well. So we have put together actually a beta test to run multiple technologies together. So if anybody's ever interested in getting involved in a contract management beta test project, reach out to me.
That's so interesting, Connie. I think almost every legal team we speak to at the moment is asking us about this space and what's happening. And you know, interesting, I think you're saying about there's so much activity, it can be really hard to navigate. And, you know, as you've touched upon, I think it's a really critical role for legal ops professionals to help our legal teams navigate this completely overwhelming sometimes market. I also love that you said, sorry, yep.
Yeah, it feels complex because right from the beginning to the end, there are like 4 segments of the industry. If you just know that, and then you make a conscious decision to implement technology, and you can implement any one of those at any time. You don't have to start with pre-signature. You can start with post-signature technologies, or you could just start with, I call it the report card technology. But it's knowing what segments those are and who is participating in each one of those segments will get you, it will be a wonderful first step.
Yes. Such a good point. I also love you said there is some AI that is working, which made me laugh because I know we have to do a lot of black hatting with clients around AI. Leo, I'd love to throw to you at this point. Interested, you know, hearing what Connie's spoken about from the in-house perspective, you know, from your perspective working in a law firm, do you find that some of the challenges are the same? What are the big rocks or focus areas for you at the moment?
It was lovely to hear Connie speak and almost take some comfort in the similarity. I think, you know, Minters is a very big law firm. There are about 2,500 lawyers at the law firm. There are a number of different businesses within Minter Ellison. And really what we're trying to do from a legal ops perspective is to ensure that there is national consistency between the groups that are working, that their processes are improved, and that they can use technology appropriately to deliver their services. The challenges that we face as a legal operations group are really around encouraging teams to work differently, particularly while they are working. It's a big ask to say to people, try and use this AI tool on a really big transaction that you're working on, which is really pressured for you. So that sort of focus on trying to help them work differently while they're working and using technology has been a big focus for us.
Leora, I would completely agree with you, right? It's people, process, technology, and people always first. And I think it is a mistake to think that law firms are the only ones who have a challenge with people adopting new ways of working. I think all of us on this call can say, oh yeah, we have felt that. And thus we're back to collaboration.
Yeah. Leora, to extend on that a little bit, I think I suppose the other piece of what you're talking about is the change aspect, and how in a legal function of any size or shape you're managing change as a legal ops professional. So I was wondering if you could just share some of the kind of pieces of the insights you've had recently about what works or what you're seeing that is successful to support these legal teams actually take the steps forward.
Sure. It also, there's a big piece around it, depends on the group. There's a level of maturity that differs based on who you're working with. But I think what has been most successful, particularly from that change management perspective, is not holding people's feet to the fire. It's bringing a level of empathy and understanding that, again, you're asking them to do things very differently. Sometimes you're asking people who've been working in a particular way for 30 odd years to now trust technology, to trust you, to trust a new process. I think you need to be vested in going on the journey with them. And they need to trust you if they're going to move forward on that journey. Another big piece would be listening. I think you've got to listen to your stakeholders. You've got to hear what the opportunities are. Sometimes it will be a case of your stakeholder just offloading on you. And you've got to be able to distill that and to identify the opportunity and to present the opportunity in a way in which it can be received by someone who is very, very busy. And the last one, I think, is that there are no silver bullets. So it is very, very tempting to overpromise, to get caught in a trap of saying, oh, this particular piece of technology can solve all of your problems. Steady improvements, incremental improvements are those which often gain the most traction.
Do you know what I love about that? I was just looking at the other panelists and everyone was nodding heartily to everything you said. So my sense is that it's resonating quite a lot with the rest of the people on the call. Anna, I'm going to throw another question at you, but feel free, if you've got anything to add into this, to add it into your response. So just looking forward to the future a little bit around what we're thinking some of the big developments are going to be in the legal ops industry. Obviously, Connie's spoken about the contract piece. Thinking about the blue sky big bang changes. I know you're involved in a lot of thought leadership and over the horizon thinking. So what are in your pipeline of exciting things in the next 2 to 3 years? What's on the radar?
Well, I mean, I looked at, in terms of the developments that I think are going to impact me and the business that I'm working with. I think there are 3 key developments over the next couple of years that are going to be really significant. So the first one is data and how we use our data. I think in-house teams are slowly getting a handle on gathering or implementing tools and systems to gather data. And it's about how we can use that data to work more efficiently, to do more with less, to do things faster, to do things differently, to work out what we're not going to be doing anymore. And I think teams are going to be a lot more directed over the next couple of years because they will have data to inform their decision making. I think the second key area is AI, and obviously, everybody on this call and potentially in our attendees have dabbled in or seen some tools that I guess, leverage AI. I think it's fair to say that we're all of the view that it is in the early stages of maturity, and there's a lot more to come. And I think over the next 2 years, that's when we're going to see the explosion of the benefits or the increasing benefits of AI tools in the legal ops space. And the third big area that I see is around working differently with our legal service providers, and whether that be our traditional law firms or alternative legal service providers. I think in-house teams are going to increasingly build broader and different relationships with their legal service providers to drive change in the way that legal services are delivered, to drive change in the fee structures for delivery of legal services, to increasingly use technology to augment sort of the traditional people-based lawyering, to not only improve efficiency, speed, consistency, all of those benefits I think we're going to be seeing over the next couple of years.
Just picking up on that point about benefits and sort of linking it back to what we were talking about around change, do you have a sort of a strategy or focus for how you hold the lawyers' hands through what I suspect is going to be quite significant change for teams that may already be fatigued after a few years of just, all out chaos? In your team and your role, do you have some particular strategies for supporting that change fatigue if you see it on the horizon?
Yeah, look, it's a real challenge, and I do think that people are feeling very fatigued right now from 2 years of working remotely and responding to the pandemic. Strategies, I think that you've always got to be aware of the fact that some people are going to embrace the changes that you're implementing with vigor and keen interest. Some people are going to resist the entire way, and there's going to be a large group of people that are probably in the middle and kind of flipping from one to the other, depending on what the change initiative is. And I think you've got to embrace both ends of the spectrum. You've got to expect that change is hard, and change, particularly introducing new processes, new technologies, is going to affect people differently, and you're not going to get consistency in your take-up, interest, or adoption. And I think being open to that and responding to that, I think is important. I think trying to tap into this, what does it mean for me, or what where's the benefit for me, I think is the key. Because people are always interested in what's in it for them, and so if you can really articulate that, and that's probably going to be different things for different people, so you've got to be really careful about that as you face into change. It might not be a consistent message of what's in it for me. What's in it for the leaders, what's in it for the users and the doers, what's in it for the people that manage teams, what's in it for the people who are just simply a member of a team, I think is an important question to always ask yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That client-centric approach, I suppose, that we're all espousing. Thank you, Anna. Connie, going to you, obviously as a founder of Clock, part of your sort of, vision to look forward over the horizon. What do you think are the really big bang changes you're seeing come down the line? So at a global scale, what do you think are going to be some of the real things that move this practice along?
A couple of comments, and I would agree with you, Anna, that data is going to become more and more important. They talk about data as being the new currency. And so I think that we will be looking at translating words into data And that will fundamentally change how we work. I also want to comment just briefly on change fatigue. I think in one aspect, there has been a lot of change. And in the other aspect, what a fabulous opportunity this has been to catapult the way we work and automation. Just look at electronic signature. From one day to the next, we couldn't sign, and the next day we were signing. And so I do want to make sure that we balance that out, because we made a lot of progress much more quickly because of the pandemic in pushing forward an industry that has been so hesitant to make some steps forward. I do think that we are going to be increasing the number and the quality and input of the legal ecosystem. I happen to be at Harvard right now. I'm speaking 3 times tomorrow. I've spoken at Stanford. I have spoken at Berkeley. The law schools are starting to become involved at a much earlier time. They're going to have their hands on technology, and they will expect to be using technology when they go into their private practice. That will just inherently change the culture of many of the workplaces that we are now struggling with getting to change how they've been working with for 30 years. The second is diversity. And I think there is a very strong focus on diversity, and there are all kinds of studies that talk about if you have a diverse team, you perform better and you work differently. And that too is starting to become a focus. We are measuring how we're doing in terms of creating diverse teams. And you probably all know, but we have a summer series that we have partnered with Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge that runs every summer. And that was developed because of a relationship, because the chancellor came and said, we're doing things differently. And I thought, everybody thinks they're doing things differently. We went to the school and we interviewed these students, and one after another were incredible talent, and they had a sense of grit and gratitude that I have not seen before in the space. And those students simply, particularly prior to the pandemic, simply have not had access to some of the roles, and some of it is geographical. So again, the pandemic is opening some doors in terms of diversity and how we work with people and with where are they even located. And then finally, the role is going to expand. So we are getting ready to launch legalops.com. It will be a new, more expanded version of running legal like a business. It will start talking about legal operations as a practice area. And we will also start having in the room conversations around personal development. You know, we all on this call realize that there has been very little training other than on-the-job training. And some of that too will begin to change, so that if you want to make a decision to go into legal operations, you can do that from the outset of your careers.
What I'm hearing from that, Connie, and probably pretty exciting for hopefully a lot of people on this call, is that this is a space that is just only going to grow and grow. So for those that are interested early, I think, as you say, the difference we'll see in the next few years around access to education, certifications, et cetera, is going to be really interesting.
One other, Mollie, you bring up a really good point. The other thing that is happening, that we're watching happen, is that people in these legal operations roles are beginning to move outside of legal, because this role is so broad. So for example, our general counsel is now the head of strategy for the whole company. And we're starting to see GCs move into CEO roles. And as that happens, as the GC role changes, so does the legal operations role change.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it goes to the heart of some of the things we often talk to legal teams about, you know, that sort of that strategic focus as a critical piece rather than turning, you know, just a risk focus, that strategic lens that comes over the top. So, I mean, that all sounds very exciting. Connie, I just want to throw a sub question out of notice. I hope you haven't had notice on this, but I think we see in the Australian market, obviously, we are steps behind the American market, particularly in terms of, say, the recognition of the need for a legal ops professional in an in-house environment. So, you know, we have two of the sort of leading in-house legal ops professionals on this call, but we're still talking to a lot of GCs that are working out how to make the business case. I'm just interested in, you know, you've obviously seen the growth of that in the US market from having to sell it to it being almost a given. What do you think are the key things that shift the dial from going from, you know, having to really fight for the headcount to it being an assumption that a legal team of a certain size will have an in-house, a legal ops professional?
This is the easiest role in the whole wide world to sell because it pays for itself. If this role has not paid for itself in 6 months, something is wrong. And again, I'm going to go back to collaboration. So if you need help from one of your colleagues who has been in this role, get together and build a business case, because it is very hard to not pay for yourself within a very short period of time. I think you're right in terms of progression across the globe. The US has increased this the presence of this role faster than those across the globe. I think part of that is due to the fact that in the US, we started with spend. And in Europe, we start with contracting. And up until very recently, it has been a challenge to get the contracting technologies to function well enough that there is an immediate ROI. Because if you're trying to sell adding a new headcount and a new role, you have to pay for yourself quickly, not over 5 years. Yeah. It needs to happen now. The technology is just now, and again, it's because of the pandemic. We went from 3 technologies to 31 technologies since joining NetUp a decade ago. 4 of those, however, were added since the pandemic. And as a result of, oh, wow, not only do we have easier adoption because we have to work differently, but they're actually working. So yeah. A couple of things. I should put in another plug for PwC in Australia as we talk global, has partnered with a couple of us to create a metrics catalog. So that's going to be offered to the industry as a whole. Again, back to collaboration.
Yeah, it is a big, I find it a big friendly industry in terms of people willing to support others in these roles. I think personally it's because when you get into one of these roles, you feel like you've come upon this secret, amazing job that, you know, once you discover the world, you're like, why don't more people know about this great job I have? So just, we've sort of talked about the big picture, Julian. I just want to zoom back in a little bit. You're just coming up to you've just had your 1-year anniversary as head of legal ops at ANZ. Just interested in your experience and any advice you have about someone that's starting out building a legal ops function and how that's been for you.
Sure. And look, it's great you mentioned that secret job that no one really gets, and it's amazing that you can get this job. Try explaining to the people, to your family, to your friends, what your job is. No one really gets it. They're all like, oh, you're a lawyer. No, I'm not. I never have been, but thanks for asking. Look, the piece of advice, and because I am at ANZ, which is in a highly regulated environment, it's great for me to hear people like Connie and Leora and Anna speak, because that's my roadmap. It gets done for me by all these people who are living on far closer to the bleeding edge than I ever will. So from my perspective, the biggest and greatest piece of advice I can have for anyone is to have persistence. The one thing that you will have, we'll never have that technological bleeding edge or that huge transformation. It's, again, very much about that small incremental change. And our changes are at that people level. They're about making people do things a little bit differently or convincing people to do things a little bit differently. It's, we'll give you a little bit of this if you can give us a little bit of that, and we can all feed the big data beast together. And that's the real piece of advice that I have for anyone. That's from my personal perspective, working where I do. It's about making that incremental change and about finding those little wins that you can get. And then I can ride on the coattails of some of the others who are doing that bleeding edge work.
And in the next, say, 12 months, Julian, what are the things that are most exciting on your horizon? Obviously, you are talking about incremental change and sort of following others, but obviously there's probably a few things that are keeping your energies up.
Absolutely. Managing our external spend. And look, there's great materials on the Clock website for all these things too, which give you a really good starting point. And so we're starting with external spend because that's where we think we can make the biggest dint. And so it's about capturing why are we spending, who's doing the spending, all these things which we think are surprisingly easy are actually really difficult things to find when you're working in a really big distributed organisation. So getting a hold on our external legal spend, which will then really dovetail nicely into the next pieces, which are what are the bits that we send external that could be internal, or what are the bits that we do internally that could be external? And then it's about slowly transitioning ourselves into a really data-led organisation that makes good decisions because we have the data there to do it. And that's a real transformation for legal, because legal has traditionally been an area where lawyers just do what lawyers do. But there are an amazing number of similarities between what lawyers do and what everybody else does. And you look at the way that things have been automated through the journey. First, it was just manufacturing. We were all afraid that all the jobs were going to be outsourced somewhere else. Then it happened to accounting. And look, it's starting to happen to legal services as well too. So it's best to be part of the solution, not swept away. That's a bit later on, has always been my theory.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so interesting. I think again, it goes back to that experience for lawyers of change and how they, if they dive into it or not. It'll be interesting to see that, obviously, with the new generation who are expecting more technology, just assume a level of data, in the next 10 years as those people start getting into leadership roles. I mean, the dynamic is obviously going to change significantly. Lior, from a law firm perspective, I know you've had a lot to do with building out the legal ops function for Minter Ellison, including involvement in education, our graduate program, all these things about building up the next generation of legal ops. So interested in your experiences. What advice would you have for people that are either in a law firm world looking at this area or are trying to maybe educate juniors or look for the next generation to support their team?
I think at the heart of this is really just people. So we've spoken about how this is a change management initiative, and at the core of it are people. So it's the lawyers who you're bringing on the journey, but it's also, as you alluded to, Mollie, the next generation who are going to be coming into the legal operations roles. It is your colleagues in other business operations functions who you want to work with collaboratively to bring that change to life. I think it's very important to be nimble, particularly in the context of a very big law firm where there are different energy levels across the firm. And so I would encourage people to go where the energy is. Go where the energy is, where you can make a change, where you can share that story of success, because what it will do is just perpetuate more change. People will get excited, they'll want in on the action. And so it's really about keeping people front and center of everything that you do.
Lior, I'm going to throw another question without notice to you, as I have been doing throughout this session. I know that, Minter Ellison's up to the third year of the graduate program, currently looking at, the recruitment of that. interested in your views being involved in that. Who are the sort of people that, you know, make it? Like, who are the people that at the moment Minter Ellison is searching for that they feel will be the next legal ops stars? What are their characteristics? Because I think it goes to what I was talking about in the last session, but interested to hear from you as you're actually going through the processes.
Yeah. As you say, we've had 3 years of seeing graduates come through the ranks, and there has always been a particular type of person that has stood out. And it is not necessarily the person who's got multiple degrees. It is not necessarily the person who had the best marks at university, but it's really about being collaborative. It's about understanding that change is difficult. It's about having empathy. It's about agility. It's about working very, very closely with your colleagues in a respectful way to bring about the change. I think what is also key is having courage. So having the courage to say, oh, I don't think this is working. You could do it better. It's also about having the courage to say, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to go and find out, and I'm going to find someone who does know. So those are the things that have stood out for us. Thank you. And luckily that reflects what I said in my last presentation. So no conflict there, which is always good. We're going well for time, so I'm going to throw in a question, and I'm open to anyone that wants to answer this before we get to. I've spoke a little bit, I think, in the first session about a day in the life, and I'm sure everyone will laugh because the day in the life is that, you know, there is no 2 days are the same. But I suppose if someone's thinking, is this the career for me? Is someone happy to just share, you know, what is the reality of a legal ops job? Just a little bit of flavor around what it looks like. Anna, are you happy to?
Sure, happy to jump in. So no day is the same. And you're certainly not sitting there, you know, doing the same old contract or the same old negotiation, which is kind of where I had got to in my career as a lawyer. I think also the other thing about your day is it's very much self-directed. So you end up, I guess, focusing in on the projects that you want to implement to drive the change. So you really are driving your agenda rather than having your agenda driven by, you know, external clients or others within, say, a firm that you're working in. So there are technology projects. There are, you know, talking with vendors. There's implementing change programs within the team. So there's quite a bit of project management and really, you know, getting in and understanding how technology works. There's a lot of looking at metrics. So, and increasingly, I think that's going to become the case. And it's about drawing insights out of your metrics. So the so what from your data. So, you know, what's the data telling me that I need to do differently? And then there's that collaboration piece, working with your teams, working with your stakeholders. So there's a lot of people stuff as well. So yeah, I think that's a snapshot of my day. No day is the same, and there's lots of different stuff around people and technology and projects.
It's a really good point, I think, around that self-directed piece, because I think it's worth calling that out in the sense that for some people that just is not their jam. And you know, we have seen with some juniors that it's actually really hard if you're someone that wants to have a project and see it delivered next project, because some of these times, as we all know, you might talk to someone and the results come 4 months later. You know, it's not always linear. So I think that's a really good point to call out. It's also funny, I think, you know, in my role, both in internal legal ops and now consulting, my husband will say to me, you just talk all day long. Like it is, yeah, there's a lot of talking. This is probably to call out, if you like talking, this is probably a good job for you, because I'm, you know, spend a lot of time in meetings and on the phone So thank you, Anna, for that.
My children who've been at home quite a bit with me working from home have told me that I can get quite heated as well in that talking.
Oh, yes, I get, you're so loud. Yeah, same thing. Final question for everyone, and then hopefully we'll get some good questions from our audience. So I just want to whip around. So, you know, in the spirit of this being a new law career session, if someone's starting out looking into a career in legal ops, what's the one golden nugget of wisdom you'd give them? I'm going to ask each panelist, but Connie, I'll start with you for this.
So I have trained and then found roles for 5 legal ops professionals. It is part of my give back and to the industry. And what I look for is that grit and gratitude. That I look for the essence of the people. It's a very tough role. Julia, you talked about having perseverance and a passion for what you're doing, and a real caring for people, and an ability to collaborate both up the chain and down the chain. So if you choose to take this path as your career path, and I think you hit it on the head, no day's the same. It's interesting. It's changing. You're on the cutting edge of technology development, along with creating an empathy for those who you're encouraging to bring along with you. So it is a real, if you get into legal operations right now, it is a real gift. It's a fun role at a opportune time as the industry develops.
Love that. Totally agree. And that empathy piece is, yeah, one of my big soapbox things as well. So I love to hear that from you, Connie. Lior, I'll throw to you next in terms of your nugget of wisdom.
I would add to that mix that humility is very important. You cannot bring any arrogance to the table, despite how obvious things may seem to you. You need to really bring a level of humility if you're going to be bringing people along this journey successfully.
Very much agree. Julian, what about you?
Very much, as Connie identified, perseverance. This is great. I can just jump on Connie's coattails again. This is my whole career working out quite nicely. But I think the 2 Ps, and also building on what Lior said as well too, that perseverance bit is huge, because you are doing something that's never been done before, and you're suggesting things to people that have never really had processes suggested to them. And quite often you're trying to influence a whole organisation and not just the legal team. So I think that perseverance bit is huge, but also the persuasiveness. And I never really thought about it in the context of humility, but that humility is a huge part of being persuasive. People want to deal with people they like. And if you're coming across as arrogant, you're not going to convince anyone to do anything. So again, persuasiveness and perseverance are the 2 really big ones for me.
Thank you. Anna, over to you.
I agree with everything that everyone has said. If I was to come up with something different, I think connect with the ecosystem. And Connie talked about the legal ops ecosystem. It's a really broad, exciting and growing ecosystem. We've got, you've got your in-house legal ops professionals. You've got your legal ops professionals now growing in law firms. You've got your alternative legal service providers. You've got your technology service providers. And everyone is coming at legal ops from a different angle to solve but oftentimes to solve the same problems or very similar problems. And so, connecting through organizations like CLOC, connecting in with Connie's metrics project with PwC, there are a range of conferences in Australia and globally that are specifically devoted to building legal ops expertise, knowledge, and connections. So that would be my advice: connect with the ecosystem.
Thank you. And I'm going to, just because I
and
can.
CLI, sorry, I should
CLI,
have
yeah, of
said
course.
CLI.
CLI, yes. I'm going to throw my Terry's nodding. She's like, thank you very much. I'm going to throw in my piece of advice as well. And then Terry, I'll throw to you for questions. And this is something I always harp on about, but hopefully this panel shows it to be true, that there's no one, and I think Annie just touched on, there's no one way to do legal ops or one type of person. And I think the most important thing really is to work out what are your strengths in this area and to play through them, not try and copy what the person that's come up before you's done. So if we look at our internal legal ops team here, fundamentally different people, everyone's doing a great job, and it's just working out how to play to your strengths, because there's a whole range of ways you can do this work. Thank you all so much. It was such a fascinating discussion, and I love all the furious nodding that went on when someone else was talking. I think it goes to showing what a vibrant and collaborative, word of the day, community we have. We're very lucky, I think, to have found this profession, but also to have this really passionate network around us. Terry, over to you to see if you've got some questions to throw back to the panel.
I have, and thanks everyone. I've got to say, as I was listening to this, I was thinking about my next career path. So I just want to say I'm available now because I'm sold.
You'll get snapped up, I'm sure, Terry. You'll get hot competition.
No, absolutely fantastic. I want to put a question to you. Kind of, it's mixing a little bit of the challenges and opportunities really together. And I think that we used to think about change in the legal ecosystem really needing to be led by lawyers. I think that's where we were, once positioned. I actually see all the folks that are doing your role really as the change agents now. You're the ones that are driving change. And in part, to me, that's reflecting where the industry is changing. But also, you are taking a leadership role in that, independent of kind of what's happening around you. I often get asked the question, where can you see innovation in the industry? And I can just honestly just say, look at the role of legal ops, because what you're doing and how you're combining it really is a great example of that. But I'm wondering, in terms of, as I say, the challenge and the opportunity, that how comfortable do you think legal ops professionals are with that role? Because it's a really different change from being, as the name reflects, operational, to go to what you were saying earlier, Connie, and many of you now even more strategic and supporting those in a more strategic role. Do you think that there's an acceptance of that? Do you think that we're building to that? Do you think that that's being embraced? Or is it something that's still developing in terms of where you position the role yourselves? And Connie, I might just throw that question initially to you.
I think that the fact that the GC's role is evolving is the foundation for that question. So if you are working with a GC who is innovative and who is forward thinking, this is a very different role than if you are working in a very operational role for a general counsel who is willing to take baby steps, but is more reluctant to take risks. I think, Leo, you were talking about having the courage to make mistakes. And in this role, you are going to make mistakes. And so oftentimes, I have been working with Matt Fawcett for a decade, and he is one who has said, go, try everything. We take a look at probably 1 or 2 new technologies a week just to stay on top of things. When I get with some of the law firms, however, they talk about the fact that not everybody is like a Matt Fawcett. And so if they're not, you work in smaller incremental moves.
Yeah.
And then that can dictate where you go with your career, because the role of the general counsel continues to evolve. And as it evolves, it up-levels the role of the legal operations role as well. We haven't talked about this, but this is running legal like a business.
Absolutely.
You can take running legal like a business and you can transplant it all over the enterprise. So this not only is the role interesting, it opens many doors that are much more broad than just the legal industry.
Absolutely. And I want to throw this question to you, Mollie and Leo, as well, just flipping that to the law firm side. Do you have to have that managing partner with vision to be able to realise the promise and the potential, in a way, of legal ops, or can you get there some other way?
I'll kick off, and then Leo, I'll throw to you. I think it probably is similar to what Connie said. It probably determines the mode of change or focus. So if you've got a managing partner who is deeply supportive, excited about it, gets it, the cut through for big change is easier. But it's not to say you can't do the smaller incremental change without that, unless you've got an actual blocker, which makes life very difficult. But if you've got someone that you need to still sell it to, and you do some smaller incremental changes to bring them along the way, I think it's still doable. But Leo, over to you if you agree with that perspective.
I think that is spot on. And I think I would just add to that if you do find yourself in a situation where you are with somebody who only has the appetite for change in small bites, what I would encourage you to do is find other people in the organization or other partners in the partnership who do have that energy, so that you are able to sell the value of legal operations. You are able to show the success that the change can bring, if you do find yourself in that situation.
Fantastic. Anna and Julian, I'm saving this question for you. So here we go. Is there much interaction between legal ops and risk managers in your organisation? And it obviously has a law firm perspective as well, but I think it's probably quite similar across the board. So risk and legal ops, how do you guys go to the party together? Or not, as the case may be. Julian, go for it.
I'm happy to have a go at that. Look, the risk function at the bank is huge and really quite influential. It's essential that we actually get along with risk. It's not an option to not. And further to what everyone said here, I think one of the really big roles of legal ops is to be that conduit between legal and the rest of the business. And so our cues aren't so much coming from legal, they're coming from the business as to how can we better serve the business, and how can we have this 200 odd lawyers better serve the business in the way that they're doing. And to that extent, risk, compliance, those types of areas are in very much the same situation. We don't quite approach things in the same way. I think risk and compliance like to shut things down, and we like to get things started, or that's the way we like to sell ourselves, like we're the cool ones. But I think there's definitely a need to be able to coexist. Anna, I don't know how, as an insurer, I can imagine it's very, very similar.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because in my role, I'm also responsible for risk management within our division. So I face into this quite a lot. And I think that I like to see myself wearing two hats. So the first hat is around selling the risk management benefits from the initiatives that I am implementing. So, the streamlining, the consistency, the efficiency, the assurance that's given from, a DocuSign electronic signing process. Or document management. But on the flip side, it's saying, can we please take a risk-based approach to what we're implementing and right-size our risk management? Because as with ANZ at IAG, we have an incredible focus on risk management, and 12 risk reviews for a $5,000 tool that's going to connect my document management system with my electronic signing system is really not right-sized from my perspective. And when the lawyers are telling them that we don't need to do all of the risk reviews, it's a tricky conversation. But I think it's about working out which hat you're wearing Sometimes a risk-based approach really helps your initiatives, and sometimes it's about actually, I guess, identifying that you don't need to do all the risk hoops and hurdles on all of your initiatives.
And I guess when we combine that with the data discussion that we were talking about earlier, you can almost change the mantra from reactive lawyering to preventative lawyering, which to me is another major thing to come out of all of the many, many things that you've been talking about today. So sadly, we have to end, and it is sad because it's been an absolutely fantastic discussion. I'm just so grateful to all of you for your contribution today, and just really the candid discussion. I think it's just been incredible. Mollie, huge thanks to you, especially today, but also for all 3 episodes in this Legal Ops Focus. And if you haven't caught all 3 episodes, well, why? You need to catch all 3 of them because they're all fabulous. So please do. Really, really going to encourage you to reach out to everyone here. The offer's been made. You'll find them on LinkedIn and a whole bunch of other places, as you will find us, and on Facebook and Twitter. So please do reach out if you've got questions. The word that really was resonating with me throughout this was collaboration. These folks are amazingly collaborative and generous with their time, this session being an example of that. So do please take the opportunity to reach out if you need to or would like to. Just a quick reminder that we're featuring Legal Ops and 7 other emerging careers in law in our New Law Careers Summit in May, on the 16th to 17th of May. So come visit us there again. But for now, and again, everyone, just wonderful to see you all. And thank you so very much for today's session.
Thanks, everyone. Great to chat.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.